Good morning. It is a good morning. It's a great morning. It's a packed morning. There is a lot of stuff that has happened. A lot has changed. Things have been improved. Bugs have been fixed. Foundations have been laid. And we are going to talk about all of it point by point. I think probably as we go along, I'm actually going to denote each change with like a little bullet or something like this in the top left, just so we can know where we're at. But enough talk, there's a lot to get through. Without further ado, get excited, because we're jumping right in. First up is Craigory the Bean. Craigory is fantastic. He's awesome, love the guy. He's a real star player in the world of game development. He's totally awesome because he's simple, clear, and he gives a great idea of form and space. However, the next thing that I'm going to be working on is getting the Unreal Engine 5 mannequins into this world and giving them a custom rig and custom animations, which means that this is actually the last video that's going to have Craigory in it. He's been a fantastic asset so far, but he's on to bigger and better things. So if you guys have enjoyed and appreciated Craigory's contributions, please give him a heartfelt thank you and goodbye in the comments below. Next, if Craigory is not going to be the main character of this game, then who is? The answer is that the main character is going to be called the Daemon. Not Demon, that's a different creature entirely. The Daemon is going to be the main character of this game. And this game is going to be called, wait for it, the Daemon Change. That's not a final title, it's just because I needed something to call the project and to refer to in conversation. So the Daemon Change is what I'm calling this for now. So Project the Daemon Change. Which means that even though this is the third devlog I've made, this is technically the first official devlog for the Daemon Change. So 3 cheers for naming things, I guess. Next is the rather obvious question then, what is it that our Daemon can actually do? Well, very similarly to Craigory, the Daemon has a few basic skills at the moment. Moving forward and talking about them, rather than thinking of them as the jump and the climb buttons, it's going to be much easier to call them the legs and the arms button. Anyway, so by tapping the legs button, you can do a short hop, and if you hold the legs button, you can sprint. These two features were made to work with and complement each other. So if you're sprinting and you quickly tap the legs button, you'll actually do a long jump and launch yourself a really far distance. Also, you can now press the legs button again while you're in midair and near an object to wall jump off of that object. Currently, it's a normal oriented jump, which just means that you kick off directly away from the wall, which is something that's going to be changed in the future. The arms button still lets you climb if you are airborne and near some kind of object. Climbing has been dramatically improved all around, if not just in the sense that now you can climb across much more complex surfaces such as trees and rocks and cliffs and stuff. However, climbing has also been given some really cool upgrades. If you are climbing, pressing the arms button will let you drop down and harmlessly disengage from the wall. If you're climbing and you press the legs button without pressing a direction, then you can kick directly off the wall a healthy distance. And lastly, if you're climbing and you press a direction and the legs button at the same time, you will yeet yourself in that direction with a decent chunk of force. So this can make it very easy to climb things that are particularly tall, such as this cliff face here. Next, not only have all of these features been improved, but so has the code behind them. I'm building all of this primarily using blueprints because I can. And the blueprints that I've been using are just much cleaner and more prepared for everything that's going to come in the future here. When I said previously that I had made a character in 5 minutes, that's because I did, and it looked like this when I was done. And this is just terrible. The problem with this is that you can't start adding things like climbing and combat and inventory into a system that looks like this without it just breaking and dying under its own weight. But as of this moment, the Daemon looks like this under the hood, which is just, it's perfect. I love it. As a fun side note, and I actually meant to show this off in the last video, Unreal has a really cool feature that lets you view your code while it's running, which is awesome. And I've always been really awestruck to watch and be able to see like my game is working on both the game part over here and the code part as well. This right here is just one of my favorite things to watch. Next, as a quick side note, and just because we're talking about things going smoothly, I did really want to tell you guys and remind you, please download this game and play it whenever you can. Like literally right now, there is a link down below this video where you can download the game and just play it. Things like bug fixes and testing and feedback are only going to become more and more important moving forward. And there will always be a version available for free for you to download. I will say that the version that's free is always going to be a bit old, at least one version behind the devlog where it was first posted. The current version, the version that you're watching me play right now, that is also available, but it's only available to patrons on Patreon. All of my patrons have access to the most recent version of the game. I'm giving them assets I make, sneak peeks, polls on what's going to make it into the game and what isn't. And also to my current patrons, thank you again. I know it may not seem like much, but you guys have already afforded me way more time to work on this than I would have had otherwise, and I've been loving every moment of it. Thank you guys so much. Also, the new version of the game is out. Go check your email. Next, the world itself has gotten bigger. Each time I make something, at least so far, it's both to have like a placeholder, but also to test things that I want to do in the future. And as I've been running around this game world, I can say that I'm pretty sure the final game world will probably be, I don't know, maybe 1.5-ish times this size, give or take. It's not going to be a massive open world game, and as a solo dude, I can't make a world on the scale of like an MMO, but I think about 1.5 times this size, give or take, is not only going to feel good to run around and traverse, but it'll also give me more than enough opportunity to stuff as many secrets and doodads as possible into the final game. So yeah, definitely going to be bigger than this at least. Next up is assets, specifically textures and materials. In the original devlog, everything was just slapped onto the first thing I could put it on. I was taking basically raw textures and just putting them onto janky models. But now we've got systems in place so that things can move much more smoothly. This mostly means that I'm using two techniques at the moment that are really important, which is master materials and RVTs. Master material is, instead of a brand new material for each object in the game, I mostly just use one material, tweak it a bit for each object, and then I'm set to go. RVTs stands for Runtime Virtual Texturing. RVTs are great because, well, here, if I come over here and I look at the grass, you can see I have... What RVTs let you do is they let visual assets talk to each other. So what the grass is doing is it's actually able to like look down at the ground that it's on, see what color that is, and then change its own color to match and coincide with it better. I could talk for a long time about all of the stuff. The basic point is that assets are starting to get their placeholder foundations, which are really going to let me expand into nicer and nicer visuals moving forward. Next, and specifically on the topic of grass, I'm also paying mind to the naturalistic ecology of the world. Because this is my game and I don't really have to answer to a board of directors that don't know dick about game development, I can spend time on some really nice things, like the life cycles of grass. Over here you can see sparse splotches of grass that can transition into denser fields of the stuff. As a young grass, it has short, thick blades, and then those transition into thinner, taller blades as the grass matures, which in turn can transition to full-blown perennial grasses, such as this pampas grass, which is super awesome. It's really important to note that at the end of the day, it'll always be little things, the real things, such as how grass grows, that add that extra little bit of fantasy to the end result. And basically, I'm just really happy that I have the time to pay attention to this kind of stuff. For now, the grass doesn't actually grow dynamically, but that is something that can and probably will be changed in the future. Next up is the trees. The trees themselves aren't anything in particular of note. However, I will quickly say that the trunks are hilariously efficient because I retopologize them by hand. As good as ZRemesher can be for some things, I hate it with a burning passion, and everyone really should learn how to retopologize things properly. Anyway, The thing about the trees is actually the shader that I'm using for the leaves. This is a kind of shader I've never used before. It's far more complex than what I normally use. As a general practice, I try to avoid complex shader math when possible so that my brain doesn't implode. But as we try and steer towards that Grimgar-inspired style, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and just try new things out of my comfort zone. So this is a shader based off of Pontus Carlson's shader. Link to that down below. But the idea is that I'm going to need to use LODs to really sell the painterly style. LOD, or LOD, stands for level of detail. And it's this concept in games where the farther you get from something, such as these trees, the less detailed they actually need to be. So we swap them out for progressively lower and lower resolution trees. Now, there was a pin I saw on Pinterest that I haven't been able to find for the life of me a long time ago, but they did something very interesting in the game they were making where instead of using the LOD system to save just on memory, they also swapped out the models to create much more stylistic shapes from afar. And that technique is going to be a big part of what makes the Grimgar style possible moving forward. Anyway, shaders like this leaf shader are just an important step in being able to bridge the gap between those model switches down the line. Finally, there's a number of other bits and bobs that have been introduced. Water has been given proper scrolling textures now, normal textures, so it actually resembles water. However, it is still a single layer water material with no volumes attached, which does mean that there's no swimming and there's no cool blue effects when the camera goes underwater. Landscape pieces are in, and I think I'm going to try pushing more and more into this slate rock territory. On top of the fact that slate rock looks cool in general, one of the added benefits is that it is quite flat, which means that for the environment, creating ledges, alcoves, and blending them all together is going to be kind of built into the rock type itself. But also, when it comes to exploring the skies, having large slabs of slate floating around will give you all nice flat surfaces to climb on and jump between. There's probably some other stuff I'm forgetting, but I've already been talking for way too long right now. So the next part that I'm going to be working on is creating characters and animations. And those are crazy important because they are the fundamental ingredient and building block to making combat. Combat will be the next step after animations, and at that point, my friends, we'll have the better part of a game on our hands. So thank you for hanging out with me today, and special thanks again to my patrons. You guys are my hero, and you're enabling me so much. I've got to get back to work. I'll see you down the road, and yeah, take care.